Hello, I'm Darren again. The topic for today comes from some questions asking if I would discuss the self-righteous nature of narcissism. Another question asks if I would outline the common characteristics of a self-righteous narcissist. So to begin with, narcissism, among other things, is characterized by a huge sense of entitlement. There's being very disagreeable and highly resistant to criticism. They can be highly competitive, envious, and lack empathy for other people. But there is also a constant need for attention, validation, and admiration from others. They believe themselves to be special, entitled, and flawless. But this sense of themselves is very fragile, so they need others to validate them. And these characteristics, these traits, would be long-term, consistent, and pervasive, not just once in a while. And the narcissism can manifest in different ways. For instance, there's what's known as grandiose narcissism, there's covert narcissism, altruistic narcissism, to name just a few. But another common trait with narcissism, sometimes overlooked, is a sense of self-righteousness. Self-righteousness in the sense that they are flawless, justified, beyond reproach, and everyone else is at fault. And with a self-righteous narcissist, what we often see is the sense of self-righteousness being really prominent and often exaggerated. It's someone who believes and behaves as if they are morally superior to others. Now, it can look quite similar to altruistic narcissism in some ways, however, there are differences. Altruistic narcissists gain their validation through being seen, doing what they consider to be good deeds. A self-righteous narcissist gains their supply through others seeing them as being morally upstanding and superior. That, and trying to make others feel morally inferior. With a self-righteous narcissist, what we often think of is a religious type who exploits their religion to control, dominate, and spiritually abuse others. But not always, not necessarily. Sometimes we see someone who believes their way is the right way. They expect others to stick to their rigid rules. Their word is the beginning and end of all discussion. We can also see similarities with grandiose narcissism. However, there isn't just an exaggerated sense of self-importance, but also an exaggerated sense of morality and righteousness. Their sense of importance comes through their belief that only they know what is right and what is wrong. Their beliefs, their opinions are the only correct ones. Their way of doing something is the right way to do it. Sometimes we see someone who believes that rules don't apply to them. They're above such things. They have a higher purpose. So some common examples of a self-righteous narcissist would include, first of all, passive-aggressive remarks to imply other people's lack of moral character. For instance, someone might ask something like, "Have you seen that movie yet, that new movie that's out?" And they might reply with something like, "I don't think any self-respecting person should be watching movies like that, especially with that person in it." So they're judging the movie, they're judging the actor in the movie, they're also judging anybody who watches it. They can be quite scornful of others. They sneer, they mock their qualities, their achievements, their status. Now, not necessarily through a sense of believing themselves superior, the sense they have more money or are more accomplished, as you would see with grandiose narcissism, but they might mock and sneer because that person isn't at their level. Therefore, they must be bad, they must be lazy. Or if they find someone who is more accomplished than them, then well, they must have achieved that level of success through nefarious means. And here we see the envy, but it's presented as a moral judgment. Someone's higher level of success is obviously a reflection of their dishonest character. The people with very strong narcissistic traits tend to struggle with intimacy, which is why they tend to have only surface-level, superficial relationships. With a self-righteous narcissist, there could be little to no intimacy. Even when they're being polite and friendly, their interactions can seem cold, almost businesslike. Their advice tends to be judgmental or even dismissive. Bad things don't happen to them because of their good character, and if it does, it's usually because of someone else's wickedness. So they don't necessarily empathize with why someone else should be struggling. And there can be similarities with covert narcissism in the sense that they can often seem quite joyless. They haven't got time to be happy when there's so much corruption in the world. They haven't got time for levity when there's something terribly unfair going on. They can't relax, have fun, because they have too many duties to perform. And in some cases, it can seem as if they're locked in some kind of eternal battle against bad things, bad people, sometimes collecting wounds, looking for things to be outraged about. Now, like all narcissists, they can lie and break the rules, but if they do, they have a reason. They're justified in what they do. It's for the greater good. The end justifies the means. Their victim is such a terrible person, they deserve everything that's coming to them. But then there are those who don't break the rules. They follow the rules. They don't cheat. And that gives them a sense of superiority over others. In fact, they like rules and can be quite rigid and inflexible. Sometimes this can look like obsessive compulsive personality disorder, but again, there are differences. Obsessive compulsive personality is characterized by a pervasive preoccupation with orderliness, often at the expense of flexibility. People with obsessive compulsive personality tend to focus more on maintaining control and order over their environment. They don't necessarily try to seek admiration or recognition for it. Self-righteous narcissists can stick to rules very rigidly and can be very judgmental of others who do not adhere to their standards. Their concept of right and wrong can be quite low resolution. There's no nuance, no context, no exceptions. Some may even use the rules as a way to control, dominate, and disempower others. Now, an excellent example of this would be the Nurse Ratched character, as portrayed by Louise Fletcher in the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, if you want to watch that. Now, just like with all shades of narcissism, there can be a lot of virtue signaling. However, I think the difference with self-righteous narcissism is we don't just see them talking about how virtuous and noble they are. I think what we often see is them attacking others for their lack of virtue. They attack people for their flaws, their errors, or their wrong thinking. Again, some can thrive off that sense of superiority, often mocking, attacking, and shaming those they see as inferior. Just like communal narcissists in the workplace, communities, on social media, they actively seek out people, groups, forums who accept and validate their opinions and ideas without question. And like with all kinds of narcissism, if challenged, they tend to discredit their challengers by framing the arguments in their favor. They might attempt to publicly shame and humiliate those who oppose or challenge them. They can be condescending, sarcastic, sometimes even threaten. Common tactic would be trying to dehumanize, sometimes even demonize their opponents, sometimes encouraging group intimidation from their supporters. At work, they could copy half of the organization into their emails. On social media, they tag others onto their posts so that their target feels outnumbered. They can use straw man arguments, deliberately misinterpreting or misrepresenting their opponent's words to make them sound foolish or evil. Another common trait of narcissism is vindictiveness, and a self-righteous narcissist can be every bit as vindictive. Anything they do to silence or punish others comes from their superior sense of morality, their higher moral code. Again, the end justifies the means, because they believe they are the good guys. So in conclusion, a self-righteous narcissist believes themselves to be morally superior to others, and it's through that sense of superiority that they dominate, control, and punish. And their validation comes from others who agree with their opinions and their standards. And they can have contempt for those who don't agree or those who don't reach their standards. And sometimes they might behave as if people aren't disagreeing with them, but they are disagreeing with a higher power, a higher value, and can feel justified in anything they do or say to regain that sense of superiority. It's like their moral superiority allows them to act with moral immunity. Their way is the only way of doing something. Their view of the world is the only view there should be. But that's a brief outline of the self-righteous narcissist. Now, as always, there may be some things I may have missed. Please feel free to use the comment box below. There are some interesting conversations that start from these videos. But if you find this video interesting, please consider subscribing to my channel, and until next time, thanks for watching.